Mnet announced a second season of Boys Planet, provisionally named Planet B, in July of 2024, causing a stir since the most recent Mnet show, Island 2, had only ended a few weeks previously. And also since there hadn't been a second season of Girls Planet, but now there would be a second season of Boys Planet. And I don't want to be too obnoxious, but can I just say I predicted this? Kind of. Once Island 2 was announced and Kepler renewed, as I said in my Kepler renewed minisodes, I was fairly certain that Mnet would stick to larger scale male shows and smaller scale female shows, reflecting the amount of money Kepler and Zero Base One made respectively. And my belief has been supported. Not only was Island 2 a small scale show, and not only have Zero Base One continued to be treated far better than both Kepler and Isna, but no Girls Planet Season 2 has been announced, while Boys Planet has become an even larger scale show than before, with a whopping 154 trainees across 2 separate shows. This definitely shows how Mnet are funneling their resources into boy groups, and into trying to recreate the hype of 101, X1 and Zero Base One. Like, thinking about it now while I'm recording the script, I don't think I predicted this like exactly the same way, but I did predict that the Kepler members would be mentors in future seasons, and Xiaoting will be a mentor on the Chinese version of Boys Planet as a dance mentor. I unfortunately didn't predict that the Zero Base One members would also be mentors because, well, I didn't think this would happen so soon. But Zero Base One, right? What about Zero Base One? They're not even 2 years old. Yeah, a lot of people have been pretty pissed about this since it's only been like 2.5 years since the airing of Boys Planet Season 1, and since Boys Planet 2 will start airing only a week after Zero Base One's second anniversary, meaning that the final group, yes, singular, will be formed literally before Zero Base One disbands. Insane to even think about. In this video, I want to discuss the timeline and drama surrounding the announcement of Boys 2 Planet, or Boys Planet 2, and we'll consider this timeline in relation to produce. Then I'll talk about the implications of the show, especially the fact that it's running so early, on the likely future of produce and of the other pseudo-produce groups around right now, Kepler, Zero Base One and Isna. I'll also discuss the concept of the show and whether this announcement and running the show so soon is disrespectful to Zero Base One, as many Zeroses have complained. Finally, I'll finish with my takeaways for Boys Planet 2. Basically my tips for the mentality I think you should have while watching it in order to get the most interesting and least toxic experience out of it. There isn't a particular trigger warning for this video unless you count Mnet and produce, and also Zero Base One disbandment discussions. I know that gets to a lot of people. So with that said, let's get into it. Let's give a rough timeline of what's happened so far. So, Boys Planet 2 was first announced under the name Planet B in July 2024 to be open for auditions, with a planned show run date in 2025. Oddly enough, no one seemed to notice at the time that this air date would be while Zero Base One was still a group, and everyone was more focused on how weird it was to announce it so soon. To be fair, I also didn't notice the 2025 air date, so I can't really criticize people for that, but also I'm one person and I'm talking about the whole internet here, so I'm a bit surprised the whole internet didn't notice it. Oddly enough, it was also announced that Planet B was actually an audition prequel show for the real survival show, so theoretically would showcase the audition process for Boys Planet 2. This is, in my opinion, a really good way to make money out of people by showcasing part of the program that is usually private, and would be an interesting insight into the pre-production process of a produce show. But at time of writing this, we haven't actually heard anything else about Planet B as a prequel show, and I don't even think the idea that it was supposed to be a prequel show is well known. I mean, realistically, at this point, it's probably not happening unless it's literally released as a documentary after the group has been made. Regardless, Boys Planet 2. The actual show was announced in November 2024 and was given the subtitle Twin Project, aka there would be 2 shows, a Chinese show and a Korean show that would run simultaneously and presumably create 2 groups. First of all, it might seem a bit odd they decided to go with a Chinese show and a Korean show considering the popularity of K-pop in Japan, Japanese trainees, and idol bands in China, but in hindsight, it actually kind of makes sense. First, Japanese trainees are often invisible edited on survival shows, especially Mnet ones, while Chinese trainees are evil edited and thus more divisive. This means that, oddly enough, Japanese trainees tend to perform worse than Chinese ones, who, yes, are more divisive, but, any publicity is better than no publicity, right? And that is certainly the case on survival shows. Also, the elephant in the room, Hallbin. Yeah, like I will mention in the Hallbin minisodes, it definitely seems like the KC concept was at least partially motivated by the insane success of Hallbin. Regardless, this concept also drew comparisons to EXO's original concept, and I have, myself, compared it to ENHYPEN and team, which is a parallel that I think most people have overlooked. Fans also speculated that this was to prevent global trainees from ranking first, as Junghao did, but goodness knows if that's a real reason they did it. Auditions for the program had to be extended several times, and had to be expanded to explicitly market to other countries outside of Korea and China, like Malaysia and Thailand. Fans speculated that this was because of the huge number of male survival shows that aired in the 2023 to 2025 period, possibly motivated by the success of ZB1, may I add, which could well have sucked the trainee pool dry, especially in Korea. I could already think of several off the top of my head, but a quick Google revealed that the 2023 to 2025 period ran, or is currently running, Boys Planet 1, Fantasy Boys, Universe League, Project 7, Starlight Boys, Make Mate 1, ON High, Be My Boys, Debuts Plan, and now Boys Planet 2. Sure, some of these shows, like Debuts Plan, had small numbers of contestants and were relatively internal for certain companies, but 4 of these shows had numbers of contestants around the 100 mark, several had between 30 and 50 contestants, and those counts aren't even including Boys Planet 2, which was casting for 2 100-participant shows. That's not even mentioning the large number of Japanese, Chinese, and other Asian survival shows which aired during this time and would have sapped both Korean and non-Korean trainees from the pool. Like, literally every single guy who ever dreamed of being an idol would have been able to audition with the huge number of shows happening at this time. Many ran simultaneously, and it would be a full-time job keeping up with them. These suspicions of low trainee numbers were reinforced in May when Mnet announced that they would start with 2 shows before merging them into one to create one final group. Although, considering their later announcement of 154 trainees, it doesn't seem like they struggled too much to find trainees. So this means that 1. It is possible, although very unlikely, for a global trainee to rank first again. 2. That unlike in 2 shows where the C group is going to have an international lineup, well, we'll probably be back to only 3 maximum global members in our group. RIP C trainees. Anyway, at time of writing this script, the 154 trainees' faces have been revealed, and fans have been able to do a blind pick of 8 of them. This has, in and of itself, caused controversy, as many fans are concerned that this means the final group will be 8 people. A lot of people say this is way too small of a final group for a cast of 154, and, sure, that is very few people, but so is 11 out of 101. 90% of these contestants are fillers for the sake of spectacle and maybe a few evil edits and fun reactions. Mnet couldn't care less about the vast majority of them. They have no reason to create a larger group if they don't think it's worth it. They're certainly not going to add more members to the group for the sake of being nice to the fans and the trainees. Sure, a bigger group probably brings in more money as more fans are invested and more merch can be made for each member while sending the members to multiple places. This was apparently a big part of the point of Super Junior having so many members to begin with. But a bigger group also costs more money from the company and can be off-putting to fans, too many faces to remember. I personally feel like Mnet have reached a really nice number with 9, but 10 to 12 is too many, so I have 2 predictions here, or more like 2 options. Either the lineup is 8 people, and right now all clues point to that, or Mnet will add a 9th producer pick to the lineup for the sake of having an odd number group for choreographies, and also adding another Korean member. Now, why would Mnet want to add another member? Why do Mnet do anything? For control. If they add a 9th producer pick, they get to control who that person is, and thus to save one of their picks. And they get the added ability to, like I said, add another Korean, their favourite thing to do. This worked very well for them with Island 2, so I don't see any reason for them to give up this power. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if the Planet Pass came back this season. In fact, I was surprised they didn't have it last season, but I guess they felt they didn't need it. It wasn't particularly useful to them in Girls Planet in that they only actually had to save one of their real picks, Suyeon. She was the only one of their top picks who struggled vote-wise in an elimination round and needed the Planet Pass, but she didn't make the final group anyway. The literal only reason I could see them not having a producer pick for the final group is for a similar reason to the possible lack of one in Boys Planet Season 1. The original producer pick was Eun-sang in Produce X101, who was added to X1 over Jin-hyuk and Jungmo, who ranked higher than him, and, well, X1 were the poster child of produce riggery. Even though Eun-sang wasn't necessarily rigged into the group votes-wise, the group itself was vote-rigged, and the X-producer pick just, for me at least, will always be associated with X1 above all other groups. It might make people suspicious, especially considering how people reacted to producer picks in Island 1 and Are You Next? So, I wouldn't be surprised if Mnet don't do it. I guess we'll have to come back in 3 months and see. Anyway, if they have an 8-member group, be prepared for there to only be 2 international trainees, that's all I can say. Oh, another thing I want to mention is that I find it interesting that Mnet have brought back the 3-pointed logo for this season. In Girls Planet, the logo has a kind of 3-pointed star triangle shape made from the blank space of the 3 planets coming together, but on Boys Planet there were only 2 groups, Korean and Global, so the logo was this kind of meh snapshot of the 2 orbiting each other with a star in the middle. But if there was one thing Girls Planet did right, it was definitely the logo, which is vastly superior to Boys Planet Season 1. Hence, they brought it back for this season. But what's the 3rd planet? Well, it's the Sun. Why? Goodness knows. Realistically, the Sun is easy enough to shoehorn in. It can be justified as either the combination or final stage of the 2 groups coming together, or as representing the fans. But I still laughed when I saw it. Mnet have borderline buried Girls Planet as the black sheep of produce, yet even they have to admit that it had a fire logo. Does this mean the final group will have a concept about the 2 suns merging? Mnet, please actually explore the storyline of the suns merging. Mnet, I'm begging you. I'll do it unpaid. I'll do unpaid labor for you writing the storyline. I'll be a runner for you. I'll bring the executives coffee. Just give this group a cool storyline. Anyway, so now that you're all caught up on the background of this show, or these shows so far, let's talk about the main controversy to do with the show, how soon it's airing. Yeah, a lot of people, especially Zeroses, have been pissed. A lot of Zeroses especially have called this out as being weird. The show will air only a week after Zero Base One's 2nd anniversary, when they still have 6 months left in their contract, and a lot of people feel like this is straight up disrespectful to Zero Base One. This will be the theoretical replacement group for Zero Base One, right? Or at least that's what produce groups have been like previously, and that's how many people have interpreted Jiwoong's words on the topic. Zero Base One are being replaced. Which is like the point of produce, right? But never before has a produce group been straight up replaced by a same gender group while they're still active. And the fact that Zero Base One themselves seem aware of this fact has upset a lot of people. Another thing people have pointed out is how this seemingly shows that Wake1/Mnet have no faith in a Zero Base One renewal. If they thought they'd renew, why would they run a show for a replacement group so soon, considering the previous timeline of produce? This has further upset a lot of fans, since they then wonder, have Mnet and Wake1 even tried to have a Zero Base One renewal? Have they even given the members the time of day, or have they dismissed them from the start? Isn't that disrespectful to a group that is one of the biggest groups of the entire multinational produce franchise ever? I mean, this timeline is so accelerated that the new group will probably debut within the month of Zero Base One's disbandment or even sooner. The show will likely finish in October, a similar time of year to when Girls Planet finished, and Kepler was supposed to debut in December of the same year. If this group debuts in December or January, we could have, for the first time in produce history, two same-gender groups promoting at the same time, without one of them having renewed. Do you know how insane this is? The literal only reason that Kepler and Isna are around at the same time is because Kepler failed to gain traction and partially renewed. So let's talk about this timeline. How weird is it? Produce 101 had a pretty consistent structure. A show would air, a group would be formed and debut. While they promoted, an opposite gender show would air and said group would debut, and when the original group disbanded, well, a few months later there would be another show to create a replacement group. Yes, the shows happened 1 year after each other, but this made sense, since produce groups had shorter contracts on average. IOI only had a 1-year contract and 101 had a 1.5 years. By the time we got around to Eyes 1, we had the iconic 2.5-year contract, and X1 had an experimental 5-year contract, but we all know how that turned out. Now, let's be real, Planet 999 and by extension Island 2 are kind of produce shows. They're run by the same company with the same format outside of some experimental methods in the female seasons. They have the same goals, the same structure, the same mentors and staff, the same weird twists, the same strengths and weaknesses, the same editing, the same management, and so on. They are, for all intents and purposes, the same show, with a different coat of paint to disassociate themselves from the rigging scandal. So, we'd expect them to follow the same formula, right? Well, apparently not, because they're literally following the same formula now and people are still upset. Despite the fact that this timeline during produce meant we'd see one girl group disband before another started and vice versa for boy groups, this timeline doesn't work well with the new 2.5-year standard contract. And that is exactly what we've seen with Island 2 and Boys Planet 2. Only people care about it more with Boys Planet because it's a planet show, not Island, and because no one seems to care about Kepler. Let's break it down. Girls Planet finished airing in October 2021, hence we'd expect a male season to air sometime late in 2022, which was confirmed when Mnet literally announced their intentions to run a Boys Planet in late 2022. Boys Planet only aired in 2023 because of production issues. That would also have pushed a second female season back from 2023 to 2024, and a male season from 2024 to 2025, which is exactly what we've seen with Island 2 and Boys Planet 2. Island 2 actually started airing when Kepler were only a few months past their second anniversary, and ironically enough, the finale aired on the day Kepler's contracts were supposed to expire. Isna was created before Kepler disbanded, if Kepler had actually disbanded, of course. Similarly to the original produce formula, we're seeing the next male season, Boys Planet 2, air a year and a few months after the end of the previous female season. It just so happens that Zero Base 1 have an extra year on their contracts than 101 did. If Zero Base 1 had a 101 length contract, this would have been perfect. They would have disbanded in January of this year, and a few months later, in June and July, well, here comes Boys Planet 2. Basically what I'm trying to say is, no, Mnet aren't being disrespectful to Zero Base 1 by running a new show while they're still around. They're literally doing what they've always done, built momentum by running a show once a year. The only reason Boys Planet is happening now is because it and Island 2 were pushed back by production issues with the first season of Boys Planet. I also realised I forgot to discuss these two things in my script. So first of all, as far as Mnet and Wake One just giving up and not doing contract renewals for Zero Base 1, that's complete BS. They are 100% doing contract renewals for Zero Base 1. Like, it's convenient for them to do it. Is it likely to happen? No, and they probably know that it's unlikely to happen, but they are 100% working on it behind the scenes, and this in no way suggests that they've just not done it. Like, the people who are claiming, oh, they've just given up on it. Like, no. Why would they do that? That's just not a good business decision. The other thing is, in the time between when I started writing this script and have started recording it, there was I think it's been deleted, but there was like a fake article or a not very reliable article that came out that claimed that the final group will be 8 members and that they'll have a 5-year contract like X1, and people have been mega pissed about that. Like, people are like, oh, why aren't they giving Zero Base One a 5-year contract? Like, that's so terrible, etc. Like, why would they give Zero Base One a 5-year contract? They were the first boy group since X1. How was Mnet supposed to know that they wouldn't just flop, right? Like, X1 received so much backlash after the rigging they had to disband, even though they were one of the most popular groups to ever exist at debut. It makes no sense for them to do a risky move and give Zero Base One a 5-year contract when they could give them a 2.5-year one, a normal one, and then renew if they had to. Right? I also saw a comment somewhere where someone was talking about how the length of contracts is based on how successful the previous group was, right? So IOI were very successful, so 101 got a longer contract. 101 were very successful, so EYES1 got a longer contract. EYES1 were very successful, so they went super experimental and gave X1 a 2 times 2.5-year contract, right? Then X1 collapsed, but EYES1 were pretty successful, so they gave Kepler a 2.5-year contract, and they gave Zero Base One a 2.5-year contract because Kepler were like meh success, right? Zero Base One have been incredibly successful, so they gave ISNA a presumably 7-year contract as a smaller group, and they're now giving the Boys Planet 2, if this is correct, group a 5-year contract, right? Like, that makes sense. Basically, it's not disrespectful to Zero Base One at all, it's praising them and their success. If Zero Base One hadn't been this successful, then this group wouldn't be getting the 5-year contract. This is like the definition of Zero Base One are paving the way for future produce groups. Anyway, it just annoys me how people are so like, this show's so disrespectful to Zero Base One. Like, what are you talking about? Out of the 3 groups they have currently, Kepler, ISNA, and Zero Base One, they've been by far the best to Zero Base One. Alright, moving on. So, as far as the 2 shows running, well, that's a different beast. Basically, 2 shows equals more money, more attention, a guaranteed Korean center for one of the groups, experimenting with new things to get more interest, which is something they did with almost every season of Produce, and also Hallbin fans and EXO fans tune in because of the KC marketing. If nothing else, they get to see if the idea sticks. So yeah, not weird at all for this to be happening, but like, what does this mean? You know I love a good implications section, certainly in regards to Produce. Okay, so first things first, and the title of this video, what about Zero Base One? Yeah, well, like, what about them? They're set to disband, they're a ticking time bomb! Okay. On a more serious note, a lot of Zeroses have been upset that Boys Planet 2 has been confirmed to air even though Zero Base 1 are still around, and they're upset that, according apparently to Jiwoong, the Boys Planet 2 group is a replacement for Zero Base 1. This implies that Mnet are certain that Zero Base 1 will disband, and that they know that they will need a boy group to replace them, right? Well, actually, only kind of. Island 2 was confirmed to air before Kepler were confirmed to be renewing, and there were conflicting reports about whether Kepler would disband or renew as close as a few months before said renewal, after Island 2 had already started airing. By this Zero's logic, we would assume that Mnet/Wake 1 knew that Kepler wouldn't renew by airing Island 2. But they did renew. Hence, this doesn't automatically mean Zero Base 1 will disband, but I do still agree that it's not a good sign. Regardless, like I've said, I don't think it's disrespectful to Zero Base 1. I mean, from the moment they were formed, fans were speculating about their disbandment and their careers after disbandment. In my personal opinion, Mnet making a practical choice about the future of their company and series is far less disrespectful to the group than the amount of disbandment torture porn type content that has been made by their own fans. But that's just my opinion. And you know I hate Mnet more than most for their manipulation. And also that I wish for Zero Base 1 to be successful, and for the members to be coveted enough that they have to disband, because they just get better offers from companies. I mean, I do think it's unlikely for Zero Base 1 to renew, but Boys Planet is not the reason. Anyway, I reckon that Mnet ended up announcing the shows would be combined at the end, partially because of the lack of trainees, and partially because I guess the logistics of running 2 shows would be significantly more complicated than 1 show, especially if the Chinese show is hosted in China, not Korea. I reckon we won't see another dual show Boys Planet unless this season is super successful in split format. It's just too much work, too much content for fans to watch. And yeah, they're experimenting, and that's part of the appeal of each new season of produce, but most of the things they've experimented with they actually haven't done again. I.e. different organisation collaborations, global voting with equal weighting, a producer pick in the final group, cells, and so on. Now, in other news, I think this confirms that we're unlikely to see another Girls' Planet on a large scale, unless the show splitting tactic is really successful, in which case they may do like 3 shows of 30 contestants that come together at the end. But like I said, unless they're super queasy for some reason about doing 2 female island seasons in a row, I doubt we'll see large-scale girl group shows in the near future. Alternatively, we could just see more boy group shows out of Mnet in general. The girl groups are looking borderline not worth it right now, and they may just decide to go with the easier publicity and drama, especially since Boys Planet had far less destructive drama than Girls Planet, with all of the good drama still intact. Kepler and Isna are both doing decently right now anyway, so unless Wake One wants to really expand their portfolio, there's no real reason for them to make another girl group in the immediate future, certainly not before Kepler disband. I'm honestly super curious to see how all of this goes, and when I say this, I mean everything. Zero Base 1, Kepler, Isna, Produce, Boys Planet 2 and the resulting group, Zero Base 1 after disbandment, Girls Planet Island, and so on. I may have mentioned this in an earlier video, but my curiosity is endless. So, with that all said, what do we have left? We don't have a disrespected Zero Base 1 in need of defending on our hands, but we do have another season of an Mnet survival show, and you know I have pretty strong feelings about how those shows manipulate their audiences. So, since this is the first show I've made a video about before the show actually came out, let me give you some hot tips and key takeaways to keep in mind while watching, voting for, or hearing news about Boys Planet 2. I genuinely believe that these points will be useful regardless of whether you've never seen a survival show before or have watched every K-pop survival show since the beginning of time. Basically, please take my new motto to heart: a critical thought a day keeps the parasocial away. Or, as I've changed my Reddit flair to, a critical thought a day keeps Mnet away. Yes, I am actually proud of that one. But also, the normal saying applies. Take everything, like literally everything with a grain of salt. I beg you to not get too emotionally invested in this show. Yes, there are talented people who should debut. Yes, there are interesting characters. Yes, shenanigans, both good and bad, will happen. And yes, it is normal and even good, as in a sign of a healthy brain, to feel empathy for and a connection with many of these trainees. But you shouldn't be so invested that your life revolves around the show and who survives or is eliminated. And I say that as someone whose week was ruined when Gunnook ranked 12th in the 3rd eliminations of Season 1. That was not healthy. Although I think it's worth participating and finding a bias, I also think it's worth having a certain level of emotional detachment from this show. At the end of the day, this is a show run for one reason: to funnel money into the pocket of one of the largest media companies in Korea. This means that 90% of those 154 trainees are extras who will get 0 screen time. It means that there will be riggery and weird editing. There will be xenophobia. There will be manipulation and mistreatment of the trainees. Things will be exaggerated for drama, and there will be almost no global trainees in the final group because the competition is literally rigged against them. The chance that your favourite trainee makes it into this group is very low, unless they're massively favoured by Mnet or are the Signal Song Centre, in which case, well, Mnet wanted them in anyway, so was it really your choice? That's very philosophical. But also, like, I say this as someone who voted for Gunnook. Like, Gunnook was literally rigged into Zero Base 1. Mnet tried so hard to get him in. Honestly, you, me, any individual, or even decently sized group of people will have very little, if any, effect on the outcome of this show. There will be billions of votes cast. The 14 votes or so I cast for someone will do nothing, especially as an international voter. The wishes of the Korean public, and above all else Mnet, will reign supreme. Even Kepler and ZB1, who ended up with a few members that Mnet didn't really like, were mostly made up of trainees they liked, because their riggery works for the most part, and that's by design. As a matter of interest, I reckon that 7 members in both ZB1 and Kepler were people that Mnet wanted, like they got their way with it. Mnet specifically target a young audience and manipulate them, claiming to give them the power to protect the dreams of trainees often only a few years older than them, which makes them feel a greater sense of connection to the trainees and a greater need to, quote, protect them. When we feel a greater connection to someone, we're more likely to try and help them, in this case through votes, views, and purchases. Also, a lot of these younger viewers who have more time on their hands to interact with the show and trainees haven't had enough education to fully understand the implications of Mnet's editing, something even people like me with an education in film can have trouble seeing. I discussed this more in my Island 2 minisode, but yeah, Mnet get their way most of the time and manipulates their audience into thinking that they, the audience, were the ones who made the choices that were spoon-fed to them. So although I encourage you to enjoy this show, I also encourage you to keep a critical eye on the edits and structural choices especially, and consider what Mnet has to gain from these choices. Answering that question will usually tell you why they made them. And don't forget, Mnet doesn't deserve your tears. I have considered making play-by-play videos for each episode as it comes out, to help people keep their wits about them during the show, but decided not to, as I knew I wouldn't be able to keep up with it. However, if you do have thoughts you'd like to share during the show, feel free to use this comment section for them. I'll be keeping an eye on it. I also plan to keep a close eye on the Boys Planet Reddit during this season, something I kind of did during Island 2 and found to be a really interesting experience. So if you're curious to keep up with my opinions on the show, well, first, thank you for being interested in my opinion. And second, you can ask me here, or you can follow my Reddit account, as I will no doubt post about the riggery and editing on the subreddit. I'll link my Reddit profile in the description, but it's literally just my YouTube account name. I'll be making a post explaining these hot tips and more there too, to try and reach as wide an audience as possible. Will I get banned? I guess we will see. So with that said, let's finish up this video. Boys Planet 2 has been announced to begin airing in mid-July, something that has caused a decent stir among the primary Boys Planet fanbase, i.e. ZB1 fans. The show has been accused of copying Hallbin and EXO, which is true to be fair, although it is important to mention that Hallbin was at least partially manufactured by Mnet, and also of being disrespectful to ZB1 by airing only a week after their 2nd anniversary. In this video, I've discussed the timeline of what's happened so far with Boys Planet, and how actually this timeline isn't that strange, considering the history of produce. I've also talked about the implications of this show airing now on ZB1 and the future of produce, especially in terms of girl group shows. Then I talked about some messages that I hope anyone watching this video will take away from the video and keep in mind while watching Boys Planet 2. Basically, enjoy the show but keep at least a little bit of emotional distance so you don't completely emotionally spiral. Just take everything with a grain of salt and be aware there will be a lot of misinformation going around. Also, my new favourite saying, a critical thought a day keeps Mnet away. Ha! Well, I'll be curious to see where Boys Planet 2 goes, and if you have any discussions or questions, I'd love to have them in the comments below. Survival shows are really becoming, paradoxically, one of my favourite things. So, that's the end of this minisode. Thanks for watching, I hope you learned something, and I'll see you in the next video.